feeling like sunshine, like springtime, like something's in the water and I'm taking a deep dive. I'm feeling so weightless, like I'm gonna make it, and nothing in the universe can take this. I can see it clearly now, nothing gonna bring me down. I got my head held high, I'm on my way, and I'm following the signs to my happy place. I'm walking in the light of a brand new day, and I'm right where I belong in my happy place. I got my head held high, I'm on my way, and I'm following the signs to my happy place. I'm walking in the light of a brand new day, and I'm right where I belong in my happy place. And I'm right where I belong in my happy place. And I'm right where I belong in my happy place.
Hi, hello, and welcome to the National University of Singapore Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine Healthy Longevity webinar. Thanks for joining us again tonight. I'm coming to you from Dublin, where we're having the Longevity Summit Dublin, which has become one of the major conferences in the longevity science space. So we're hearing all about the latest new discoveries. And we have an exciting speaker here on the show tonight. Carel Meskers is going to be talking about longevity and rehabilitation. I want to remind you during the talk to use the Q&A function and ask whatever questions come to your mind. I'm sure they'll be interesting. Before we get to Carel, though, I'm going to introduce Lim Yu-Shin, undergraduate final year project student at the NUS Center for Healthy Longevity. She'll be talking about her lab's project, trigonelin as a novel bioactive for benefits in aging. An update.
Thank you for the kind introduction. As mentioned, I am Lim Yu-Sin, an undergraduate student from Sorrentino Lab at the National University of Singapore. Today, I will present to you my research updates on trigonelin as a novel bioactive for health benefits in aging and disease. Aging is a highly complex process that is characterized by a range of hallmarks that are interconnected and drive aging. Understanding these hallmarks allows us to develop therapeutics to promote healthy longevity and protect against age-related disease. One molecule linked to this aging hallmarks and aging disease is NAD, which plays a pivotal role in various essential cellular processes and functions, including mitochondrial function and DNA repair. Trials involving small cohorts and preclinical work have shown that NAD levels in muscles and the brain decline with age. Hence, as shown in this figure, many NAD precursors have been utilized to boost NAD levels through biosynthesis and recycling pathways. You may have heard of popular supplements such as nicotinamide riboside or nicotinamide mononucleotide, which enter the salvage pathway. However, work by my PI, Vincenzo Sorrentino, has identified a novel NAD precursor, which increases NAD levels through the Praise-Handler pathway, which is normally used by niacin, otherwise known as nicotinic acid. The study, which was a joint effort by Nestlé Research and NUS, discovered a depletion of a molecule called trigonelin in serum samples of Singaporean patients afflicted with age-related loss of muscle mass, clinically known as sarcopenia. Increased serum trigonelin levels correlate with increased NAD levels in muscle, as well as better muscle function and health indicated by grip strength, which is a metric that is commonly used for the diagnosis of sarcopenia. This finding thus suggests that trigonelin may potentially benefit muscle health, a key predictor of longevity. Trigonelin may sound foreign to you, but we actually consume it every time we eat garlic, coffee, and fenugreek seeds. The recently published work showed that trigonelin worked mostly through the Praise-Handler pathway by comparing with the NAD precursor nicotinamide riboside and using 2-OHNA, an inhibitor of the Praise-Handler pathway. In addition, trigonelin had lifespan extending effects in the C. elegans worm model. In light of this lifespan extending effects of trigonelin treatment in C. elegans, my project seeks to further investigate the pathways implicated in this short-lived organism, with a focus on two interconnected aging hallmarks, namely mitochondrial dysfunction and protein homeostasis failure. The use of the worm model has several advantages as listed here that make it a powerful animal model for both basic and clinical aging research, ever since its feasibility as an aging model was first discovered back in 1993. Importantly, the NAD biosynthesis and recycling pathways, as well as age-related changes in mitochondrial function, are evolutionarily conserved in C. elegans, making it a suitable animal model for my project. Shown here are some of my preliminary results. The image on the left shows some worms stained with a red fluorescent dye called TMRM. A decrease in this red signal intensity, which we observed during aging in worms, reflects depolarization of the inner mitochondrial membrane, which is indicative of mitochondrial damage. We observed that TMRM signal intensity was maintained in trigonelline-treated worms during aging. We also studied trigonelline's effects on mitochondrial homeostasis by using the mitotracker green dye to visualize mitochondrial density in worms. Aging is usually associated with mitochondrial dysfunction, and normally mitochondrial homeostasis will repair or replace the damaged mitochondria with new healthy ones. However, during aging, these homeostasis pathways are often impaired. Thus, older worms appear to have more mitochondria, but not necessarily functional ones. Compared with old control worms, we observed a lower mitochondrial density in aged trigonelline-treated worms, similar to old NR-treated worms. Altogether, the TMRM and mitotracker-based results suggest potential protective effects of trigonelline on mitochondrial function. Future work will involve further validation and genetic epistasis experiments in C. elegans on the mechanisms of trigonelline for mitochondrial and health span benefits. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. We'll be excited to hear what trigonelline does in future studies. Before I introduce Carol, I want to let you know that we're being attacked by video gremlins tonight and having some technical issues. So if you experience challenges with one of the videos, it's probably not you, it's probably issues we're having, and we're doing our best to work around that. Carel Meskers is a renowned specialist in rehabilitation medicine with a focus on neurorehabilitation. He holds a full professorship at Amsterdam University Medical Center, where his research explores neuromechanics. In other words, the interaction between the neuronal control system and the biomechanical muscle joint skeletal system. He leads a number of neuromuscular diseases, including with respect to aging sarcopenia. He leads the Aging and Vitality Research Program at the Amsterdam Movement Sciences Research Institute and serves on its board. And beyond academia, Professor Meskers participates in several major Dutch public-private partnerships that bring together engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs to develop sustainable technology-based healthcare solutions. A lot going on. His presentation tonight is longevity from a rehabilitation perspective. Thanks for joining the show, Carel.
Thank you, Brian. From a rainy Amsterdam, thank you for the opportunity to present to you some of the issues about longevity and rehabilitation. Can I have the slideshow, please? So, let's start with the basic framework of rehabilitation, which is the International Classification of Functioning, Disability and Health. That's developed by the World Health Organization back in a while for measuring health and disability at both individual and population levels. Some key features are its holistic approach and focus on functioning instead of the traditional focus on diagnosis and disease as the essential components of health. The ICF is basically divided into two parts. The horizontal part, in a way describes the transition from an individual state, that is, body function structures which may be affected by disease, to activities and participation, which describes an individual's capacity to perform tasks and engage in daily life situations. Now, the second part comprises contextual factors, which are environmental and personal factors. The ICF offers a comprehensive, inclusive and universal model that is very well fit for a broader perspective of health next to the International Classification of Diseases. Now, the classical application of rehabilitation medicine is in diseases which bear a high risk of disability, for instance, in case of stroke. This may result in severe motor, speech and cognitive impairments. And these impairments may subsequently endanger activities and participation, for instance, walking ability. which naturally may have consequences for our role as society, for instance, getting back to work. Now, this is a sort of typical patient you may encounter in rehabilitation. Patient who suffered a severe stroke in her left brain hemisphere, leaving her with a weakness or hemiparesis at the right side of her body. When you take a good look, you may notice that she's still able to walk. It's not only by making use of the crutch on her left side, but mostly by making use of her non-affected side of the body. In a way, one may assume an optimal adaptation to a severe lesion and adjacent deficit. Now, the quite intriguing part is that a single neurological lesion leading to a loss of neurons within the brain triggers a cascade of mechanisms throughout of the body, encompassing not only neural but also biomechanical and behavioral mechanisms, which may be adaptive or maladaptive and which need to and can be intervened upon, either per promotion of adaptive behavior or disencouragement of maladaptive behavior. The burning questions are eventually what are the driving mechanisms and what optimization criteria are being applied? Most importantly, how do these processes interact? Now, put it in a more grabbable scheme, but it all may come down to two distinct pathways. It's either primary restitution or repair, that is, return to the system to the pre-lesional state, and compensation. The first part seems to be driven by a process called spontaneous neurological recovery, which is quite determined in time, which is the first 10 to 12 weeks post-stroke. And this appears to be highly predictable, as can be seen from recovery profiles of upper and lower extremity, which can be predicted by relatively simple algorithms at baseline. The high predictability indicates that there is hardly any influence of events and interventions post-stroke, so that we are looking at an autonomous process more or less. Now, the second path involves a process of motor relearning, and this may encompass all rehabilitation efforts in learning people how to cope with their impairments. Now, really the holy grail of stroke rehabilitation, of which there is yet no evidence, is whether primary repair may be promoted by relearning, which means that rehabilitative efforts really contribute to primary recovery instead of offering only a compensational strategy. Awaiting that breakthrough and optimizing rehabilitation efforts, it basically comes down to know a person's capacity as soon as possible post-stroke, which is dictated by, to put it simply, a yet unknown, yet highly determined neurological repair process. Determination of capacity requires efforts in clinimetry, which may be enhanced by more fine-grained assessments of system capacity, which are performance assays, measuring, for instance, finger individuation, that is the ability to move the fingers independently, grip strength, or pinch grip, as representative for motor cortex and cortical spinal tract integrity. Now it's a question of balancing someone's performance with respect to the predicted capacity to take full advantage of someone's possibilities to regain self-dependence post-stroke. Rehabilitation efforts may be even more effective if they can be planned in advance. For instance, by knowing beforehand what a person's capacity will be at a given point in time. So what efforts are required at what time to optimize performance. Largely, they may consist of stimulating restitution, repair when possible, or compensation where repair is expected not to be possible. And this requires the use of individual prediction models. Now, despite the acknowledgement of stroke as a dynamical process in time, and despite the advantage of studying recovery after a well-defined event in time, it may be good to obtain a broader view of functioning in time, which was offered by the World Health Organization in the World Report of Aging and Health in 2015. And this report offers a more dynamical framework than the ICF, in which ICF elements are easily recognizable, as body functions and structures are aligning with intrinsic capacity, and activity and participation being aligning with functional ability, in which compensation may also play a role. The interesting question is then, at what point in time, what knob to turn in order to improve functioning, either at the level of functional ability, which may involve compensational strategies, or at the level of intrinsic capacity, which may involve promotion of mechanisms to restore pre-state body functions and structures. And nowadays, there's increasing efforts to adopt a more general approach to try to turn back the biological clock to slow down the process of aging and thereby decreasing the likelihood of age-related diseases. Now, to get a better grip on that, it may be of help to take a closer view on underlying interactions. At first sight, an open door, but probably grossly underestimated, is the tight interaction between our bodily system and its behavior. The system state dictates its behavior or human movement, while the movement itself will shape the system. That shaping will understandably be a very powerful mechanism when it is projected to daily life functioning, which is an ongoing process. In contrast to the typical rehabilitation interventions like physical therapy that mostly take a couple of hours per week. When daily life functioning is taken into account, the importance of the environment may not be underestimated as a behavioral shaper. The more interesting it is to understand the role of a third behavioral shaper, which is our own perception, not only of our performance, but also of our bodily state, confidence, for instance, and surroundings as either protective, challenging, or dangerous. Now take this Dutch skater, which seems not to be in such a happy state, considering his body posture, his bended upper body, his wide base of support, and his extended arms. So this skater might need some help here. The nice thing is that in order to help him, we have basically 4 knobs to turn. We may intervene upon his performance, we may intervene upon his perception, his surroundings, and even his system, depending on the state of each part. The point is, of course, what to know to optimize. If fall prevention would be the target, we may want to take this person off the ice immediately. But if it's about starting him to skate, it's a much more complex process because we have to have some information about his perception and his system state. And optimizing quality of life could mean a whole different perspective. We may even want to dive a bit deeper when it comes to optimizing performance. Again, depending on the state of the system and perception, task optimization, which is standing up from a chair, may go with concessions on energy expenditure and/or stability. Either task, execution, energy cost, or stability may be goals for optimization, and also maybe goals for rehabilitation efforts. Now, when reversing the paradigm in a sense, for instance, by using performance as a determinant instead of an outcome to improve system state, exercise interventions alone may not be enough if you do not know about someone's perception and/or surroundings, which may be maladaptive. For instance, maladaptive surroundings and/or perception, from confidence to fear, and surroundings from challenging to protective, may promote sedentary behavior. So, when it comes back to the life trajectory, the issue is what to know to optimize at what point in time. This may vary from time to time point, and also the horizon we are looking at, which may be short-term goals or long-term goal setting we are trying to achieve. And all that with taking the close harmony of the so-called 4 knobs into account. Difficulties may arise from the non-linear behavior of these interactive complex systems. Non-linear means that input does not equal output. For example, when it comes to improving system quality, turning up exercise intensity may not be effective when other maladaptive factors are ignored. The whole system may end up in a specific unwanted working point, which is very hard to reverse. Combined complex whole system approaches may be warranted next to very powerful attractors. And those attractors are maybe interventions that bring the system to a new equilibrium point. Another disclaimer may be an awareness of underlying heart constraints, such as the slowing of neural conduction time when getting older, which may interfere with standing balance. If this is really a heart constraint, which cannot be altered, this obviously has consequences for intervention. And then physical therapy to improve muscle strength may be ineffective at the least, but may also be counterproductive and thereby increasing the instability. Now, some practical examples how this may work out in the diverse research projects. When it comes to understanding stroke recovery, assessments at multiple levels may be required, up to fine-grained assessment capacity. For this, novel imaging techniques like extracting kinematics and kinetics from single smartphone videos may be an opportunity next to EEG-derived based source localization to measure dispersion of brain activity in real time. The Contrast Consortium, which is a Dutch nationwide collaboration between stroke neurologists, intervention radiologists, and rehabilitation specialists, offer the momentum to better understand the basic principles of recovery post-stroke. For instance, the role of collateral vascular circulation, lesion progression in the acute phase, and the role of proteins like brain-derived neurotrophic factor. By association of these biomarkers obtained in the acute phase to different domains of recovery, neurological repair, return of activities, but also self-perceived recovery, offers the opportunity to optimize prediction models for recovery. And thereby understanding the interrelation of the different domains of recovery over time in stroke may offer the framework to really get a better grasp on planning of rehab interventions for individual patients. The hypothesis here is that the interrelation between neural repair, performance, and perception is very high in the acute phase, but gradually, sort of disappears in the long run, and then other factors come into account, like some of the 4 knobs we have seen previously. Now, when it comes to measuring perception by means of patient-reported outcome, the application of questionnaires may be cumbersome, at least when it comes to repetitive application to follow patients over time. By using conversational and artificial intelligence, it may be possible to even extract fine-grained details of the ICF domains by means of guided conversations by chatbots and robots. This allows for seamless tracking of functioning over time over different domains of functioning. Conditionally for all these projects is the availability of a connecting ICT infrastructure and platform. How this may work out, also in the view, and especially in the view of privacy issues and interconnection of diverse platforms that are nowadays being used in healthcare, is an ongoing challenge, but I think a prerequisite for going on. Now, if you go back for a moment and looking at optimization of the system by exercise intervention, and the question there is it a problem of one size fits all, which is the more exercise, the better, or is it that a specific person at a specific time point needs a specific exercise program. And this may be different for different time points. For instance, resistance exercise training aimed at improving protein synthesis may be the preferred exercise in sarcopenia, while high-intensity interval training or endurance training aimed at mitochondrial dysfunction may be recommended in case of rheumatoid arthritis. How disease types relates to specific muscle characteristics, to underlying pathophysiological mechanisms, and how these interact with exercise type in improving muscle quality is work in progress. If this interaction may exist, and if those interactions can be accomplished, it's obviously a matter of predicting the effectiveness by the specificity of the applied intervention. And thereby it's possible to tune the wanted exercise type to the phenotype of the person or patient at hand at any given time point. Again, it's of importance to realize that when the aim is to optimize muscle quality in the long run, or if the goal would be to optimize performance, some other knobs have to be turned. Again, the point of perception, or again, the point of surroundings, and even the performance in daily life may be of matter. Very promising is the opportunity offered by the availability of biomarkers of aging, which are rapidly responding to lifestyle interventions. These give a short notion of the effect of a different lifestyle intervention. And these may be used to crank up motivation for lifestyle changes. Short-term reward instead of long-term investment may be the motor here. And this may also guide personalized interventions and may be a powerful attractor to induce permanent lifestyle changes. But most importantly, to align terminology and definitions, for instance, with what we exactly mean by human mobility, what we mean by function, what we mean by repair, by restitution, by compensation, is really very important to further go on in this kind of research. There's an urgent need for alignment of constructs, definitions, and terminology. Otherwise, we may up in sloppiness in our research. And that ends my presentation, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Carel. Along with the continuing challenges, my hotel Wi-Fi completely dropped for part of that. So if I ask questions you've already answered, I apologize in advance. I think this is a really fascinating talk. That's one that we don't address as much on this show as we probably should. And, you mentioned rehabilitation after stroke, but it's so important in the context of a whole range of complications that happen during aging. I'm wondering if, where, just in general to start with, since we don't have talks about this so often, where do you think we are in this process of rehabilitation science? I mean, is the new data infusion that you're talking about really going to revolutionize it? What stage of maturity do you think it's at in terms of what's possible?
No, I think we are at the beginning. So it's the dawn of rehabilitation, I would say. So the point is that many of the principles I just showed you are more or less implicitly taking into account when it comes to clinical care. So a therapist may also realize most of the concepts I just shared with you. The point is that we do not explicitly state it. So we do not explicitly state what's happening. And thereby it's all a process of, clinical expertise and empirical science. And this does not work in the end. If you really want to put the standards to a higher level, we really have to formalize these concepts to a very large point. And thereby we can, optimize. And the big question, of course, is, and that's up to be researched, is whether we are able to outperform the current clinical state. Okay, it may be possible that the current clinical practice is doing this already implicitly. But again, if we do make it more explicit, can we outperform current clinical practice? Well, the hypothesis is that it is, but that's the point to be proven in the near future, I would say.
Yeah, I think also, when it's an interesting thing from a clinical standpoint, right? Because you have a whole range of different touch points for a patient when they have something like a stroke. And by the time, a physical therapist gets to them, the question I think is, how do you get all of that communication through to the rehabilitation experts so that they're optimizing the treatment? It seems like it's an even bigger challenge, right? Because it's not just a doctor performing the care, it's really going all the way through to post-care. And then that's the people that are interacting or changing throughout that process.
Yeah, that really is the case. And the point is currently what's happening is someone gets, for instance, a lesion. The whole process is sort of lagging behind. So you see the patient, you see what he or his is able to do, and then you adjust your therapy, or you adjust your plan for rehabilitation. But then you're constantly running behind what's happening. So what you really want to do is to leap forward and to already state at the start of such a lesion, or at the beginning of a process, what would be the expected outcome. And thereby you can plan your interventions way ahead. So you already know what's happening, or you can predict that. So you can plan in advance instead of following sort of the patient. And again, it has to be proven whether these concepts or whether this approach will make clinical practice better. But yeah, that has to be proven. And nowadays we are already facing a huge burden of patients who are surviving these kinds of lesions with impairments, with disabilities, and that number is increasing and increasing. And very well known is that the number of people who are taking care of those patients are rapidly going down. So we have to do something. So we really have to optimize this process. So, there's a lot of work to be done in this area.
Yeah, I'm going to ask a question that's directly counter to what you just said, I think, because you mentioned that the number of people that are taking care of patients that are undergoing rehabilitation is going down dramatically. That's happening, I think, pretty much globally, unfortunately. But in an ideal world, do you think we should be thinking about, maybe the term is not rehabilitation, but this use it for the sake of it. Maybe should we be doing this to everybody at a certain age, or the vast majority of people, based on functional decline, as opposed to waiting until a lesion or something, an event happens?
That's a very good question. I think we are constantly rehabilitating ourselves. So it's not about the process that's determined in a sort of rehabilitation center that's far out in the bush, or at this very specific time point. It's constantly happening. We are rehabilitating constantly ourselves. So we are constantly in a process of reshaping our system by moving around or not moving around, lying down, not lying down, taking the right nutrition, taking not the right nutrition. So it's a constant process. So what I would propose is to in fact, get rid of the name rehabilitation, or state that we are constantly in such a process. So the amount of time that we are spending with ourselves moving around is a much stronger shaper than the couple of hours of physical therapy that's taking place. That's really out of balance. So the constant shaping is, I think, the point that we would like to go to, and that means that rehabilitation is a constant process. And what you also want is people not to be confronted constantly with do I do the right thing? What should I do? What people will not like to be told what to be done. every single moment of the day. You want to live your life without such a fuss. So we may want to go to some process which allows people to perform their daily activities as much as they like to do, but with a certain goal in the end. So what are the things that people would like to do? And if they like it to do, they do it a lot more. And if those are the right things for your system, then we are on the right track. That's already being done, of course, because you recommend people to do sports activities that they like. But this has to be much more this has to be much more important when giving such an advice. And this maybe implies that you have to have constant monitoring or monitoring at home, for instance, in order to be able to guide those processes from a central point of view. Those structures are not very clear yet, but you may assume that are some direct possibilities that people are coaching themselves by, for instance, smartwatch. You look on your smartwatch, you see that you didn't do too much steps today. You increase that. That's sort of a closed loop with the person itself, and thereby there should be an outer loop in which the data are being transferred to some person who sort of supervise it and then give some advice with a longer time frame to guide someone at a lower pace, but in the right direction. These are the type of processes you can think of.
Yeah, I think it's really about compromises, right? You can perhaps the ideal thing to tell somebody to improve their functional capacity or to rehabilitate them, but then there's also the question of what they're actually going to do when you're not there. And 2 hours a week can achieve some things, but not other things. And so, how do you find that balance? You have to, I think it's a challenge in prevention and longevity as well.
Yeah, you have to know it. If you don't know it, then you are out anyway, because then you are really trying to do something that makes no sense. But you cannot improve someone's activity by 2 hours of physical therapy a week. If the goal is to improve your system state in the long run. If you study the effect on the system in the short term, it's possible. Then you say, I do some training and I observe what's happening. But if the aim is to improve a lifestyle change, it's not possible if you don't know anything about someone's performance, lifestyle, surroundings at home, because, much of the time is spent over there. So you have to at least know it. You have to take it into account as a covariate, but mostly you have to intervene on that, and probably to intervene on that is much more powerful than giving some therapy in far away in an institute. So we have to do both, I think. But how to get people out of that limit cycle I showed. So these limit cycles are really very powerful in a way that they are very stable in the wrong working point. So it's not simple to get them out there. You need very complex interventions or very powerful attractors to get them into a new equilibrium and work from there. So that's really the challenge, I would say.
Yeah, you mentioned perception, and I think that gets underappreciated in terms of aging and functional decline. I'm wondering, people can be confident, they can fear doing things, they can fear aging, or they can age confidently. how much of perception is related to outcome, for instance, in rehabilitation from something like stroke? I think you're implying that it influences whether they'll do an activity or not, but I'm thinking more broadly about actual outcome. Is there good data on that?
Yeah, so when the stroke patients there's a process going on. The stroke patients are a bit different than they used to be 20 years ago. 20 years ago, there was no treatment for stroke. So they really were left with severe paresis, severe cognitive disorders. But nowadays, with the modern technology of moving away the blood clot by vascular interventions, the outcome is improved. So, but you're still left with people with motor problems and cognitive problems as well. And those cognitive problems are, of course, an outcome that really is under attention and rehabilitation. Cognitive disorders is really an issue. But it's focused on the cognitive disorders itself. So someone may have an aphasia or a neglect or severe concentration or memory problems, and that's purely of the neurological deficit. So these are really the big cognitive problems, so to say. And it's also, but the interrelation between cognitive problems, motor problems, and speech problems is not very well understood in the first place, because they are being studied separately. That's one thing. So we do not know much about the interaction. So we treat either of those outcomes separately. So cognitive by the neuropsychologist, motor disorders by the physiotherapist, and speech therapist by the speech therapist. But the real interaction mechanically or pathophysiology, that information is not there yet. That's one. And the other one is that, well, you're talking about real cognitive problems. And those are known to be associated with depression in stroke, being depressive. But that's also a very big thing. But things like fear, confidence, and so on, these may even be very important. How are you looking at yourself? And that's pretty much defined pre-stroke. People who are very confident, very optimistic, and having the ability to solve problems have a much more higher likelihood of getting getting around after a stroke in a pretty good shape. And that kind of finer cognitive issues is really something that's probably also a very large opportunity to improve people over time if you take them into account. Yeah.
So you mentioned biologic aging clocks. That is something we talk about a lot on the show.
Yeah.
I'm quite interested in how that can be applied with, we can measure people's biologic age throughout their life course and predict how they're aging, and depending on the veracity of the clocks, and I understand that point. But what about in the context of a specific age-related event, like a stroke? Do we know what happens to biologic age after stroke events, and does it recover over time, or does the biologic age of the individual predict outcome at all? Has there been research in that area?
Not that I'm aware of, but I believe there's still a big gap there. Those biological age clocks are obviously applied and validated in the community developing population, and not much within specific patient groups. So what happens after a stroke is probably something that would be very interesting to know, especially when it comes down to prediction. So when it comes down to classification of strokes, we talk about stroke as a sort of a unity disorder, but that's not true. In fact, it's from one side, a very large occlusion of a very basic vessel inside your head. That means large stroke. Well, that's a typical stroke patient. Or some minor occlusion of some small vessels higher up in the brain, which means some minor deficits. That's one. And the other one is that stroke is probably, a sudden incident above an ongoing process of vascular degeneration. So is stroke really a disease in time, or is it just a symptom of an ongoing biological process or vascular biological age, which is rapidly going the wrong directory? That are very interesting questions. And then you come to prevention, for instance. And that probably the most important thing to do is, not to wait for someone to get a stroke, but, be ahead of that. Obviously, that will be far more efficient than treating those stroke patients. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately the hope of these clocks, that they can assess people's biologic age, but also drill down further and predict onset of specific kinds of outcomes so that we can really move in much earlier into how we do interventions. I think what I'll do is bring Jiming in to ask questions from the audience.
Good evening, Prof Meskers. So there's a few questions from the floor. The first question, so what is the latest advancement in rehabilitation techniques for stroke patients? As you mentioned that using the proactive process in treating those patients, any particular examples, and how is it different from the current practice?
Well, the current practice is that someone who's had a stroke is followed over time in the rehabilitation process, and thereby the therapy that's being applied is being sort of customized to the actual state of the patient. So what's happening after a stroke is that people are admitted to a stroke unit in the hospital and then are sort of referred either to a home-based situation or to a rehabilitation center, and thereby they go from caregiver to caregiver. That's a sort of a hopping process, and the one caregiver does not know what the other caregiver did, and the caregiver higher up in the chain, so away from the stroke unit, does not know exactly what happened at stroke unit. So every time a patient is being transferred or referred to another caregiver, the whole process starts off again. So you have a sort of intermittent like process, in which the process of getting the patient to know what capacity is again and again has to be done over and over again. So what you want two things to be done. One is to get a prediction of outcome in the long run. So thereby you have an idea of what's happening with the recovery process over time, not only for the first days, but also during months after that. That's one. And the other one is you want to interconnect all those caregivers in the different stations along if the patient goes from station 1 to station 2, the therapist at station 2 has to know what the prediction would be in the end. And at the least has to know what happened at station 1. So it's about prediction, and it's all about interconnection between the different phases of stroke recovery. These are the real challenges.
Okay, I think this answer also reflects the next questions where they ask what are the key factors that influence a success of rehabilitations program. So do you have anything to add on besides the answer that you have given just now?
Yeah, the success of rehabilitation process depends on a large number of factors, and it also depends on how you define success. So that really is a very important point. But you can define success from the viewpoint of the patient. Is he or she content with the outcome and with the process of the outcome? So how does the patient feel? That's one outcome. And you can also measure outcome by how self-dependent the patient is after a while. That's also an outcome. And you can also choose the outcome to be neurological recovery. So was the patient better, neurologically speaking, after 3 to 6 months compared to baseline? So if you take the first one, you may end up with some disappointment because, we already showed that the process of spontaneous neurological recovery is much defined in time. So we cannot influence that yet. So if you want to get patients neurologically better, you may end up with some disappointment. That's one. Second, if you want patients to become more independent, there may be some success. That's possible. Most people with even severe neurological deficits can be made self-dependent again by use of compensational strategies. That can be motoric compensational strategies. People learn how to cope with their motor problems by moving in a different way. Or you may want to give them some orthosis or other devices that may be of help. And for instance, a wheelchair. If you have a wheelchair, your walking ability is not so important anymore, but you can get anywhere you want. You can at least do your shopping. When it comes to patient satisfaction, that's a much different way of looking at the process, because that may also be determined by a large number of other factors. So was he or she treated well? Was he or she given the right information? How confident was he or she in the care process? So it very much depends on what you choose as an outcome measure, what the process would look like, and how to optimize it.
Okay, great. So Prof Meskers has already mentioned the rise of technologies like biological clocks and like physical trackers. So what's your thought regarding robotics and virtual reality in modern rehabilitation practice?
The point is, and there's recently a systematic review redone in the field of robotics that showed that the effect of robotics in improving neurological state is not so large. We thought about 10 to 20 years ago that robotics may be the answer to the question of, for instance, increasing the exercise amount. So the idea was the more exercise you do, the better the patient would be. And robotics would help with that. So robotics would allow us to do much more exercise than therapists would allow. So by using robotics, you would tremendously increase the exercise intensity and thereby improving the outcome. But unfortunately, that effect is not being observed at the moment. So there's not any evidence yet that robotics will make people better when it comes to neurological outcome, so recovery. That's for one. And it also counts for virtual reality. So virtual reality may be very helpful in assisting people to fully exploit their compensational competence and help people to reorganize their behavioral state. But there's no evidence yet that virtual reality will improve when it comes to these modern technologies. You have to really understand what are you aiming at. So what is the outcome you are looking for? That's for one thing. The other thing is that you want to know, what does my intervention and what does my technical application do? So what is the aim? So at what pathophysiological process I'm aiming for? So what's exactly the goal? That's two. And the other one is, that's something that has to be explored further, is what are the cost benefits of those interventions? So ideally, you may also want to turn it around. Then you are not looking at RCTs, which are looking at improvement of therapy, but equality, so non-inferiority trials. So does my robot intervention equals the effect of physiotherapists? And if you do such non-inferiority trials, you may end up in a cheaper healthcare system, because you can replace or assist physiotherapists and caregivers in doing their thing. And thereby you're not aiming at improvement, but aiming at, sort of making the process more cost effective. So the intent and the design of non-inferiority trials that requires much more attention, I would say. So, really looking at cost effectiveness and showing that adding of those interventions make it more cheaper to the system. Yeah.
Okay. The next question. So what's your thought regarding mental health supports for patients in like integrating the mental health support in helping the physical rehabilitation? So it helps any like do you think mental health support?
If you take again so if you take the classical stroke patient, he or she, especially when it's a complex patient, and complex means that there are also cognitive problems next to motor problems, next to speech problems. You have to have a multidisciplinary team to treat those patients. We have to deal with the mental problems in order to optimize he or his motor performance. For instance, very straightforward example would be a patient with a neglect, in which the patient is not aware of one side of the body. And if you don't know that, if you don't take that into account, making someone to walk safely is a challenge. And those people with severe neglect tend to walk against the doorposts because they are not aware of one side of the body, and thereby stumbling into all kinds of environmental barriers. So thereby you have to have a mental approach in making people aware of their body in case of neglect, and then do the motor recovery. That's a hard example. Another example may be, for instance, many people have fear for movement. So they may have fear for falling, for instance, or they may think that moving too much is dangerous. So thereby fear of movement may also be a very powerful mechanism preventing people to really make use of their capacity. And thereby you cannot approach those people with physiotherapy alone. You have to do something about that mental state. You have to make people aware that something like this exists, so that fear may block them. And then in the second place, you may want to target that fear. So psychologists may play a large role in getting people to go around in a more efficient way, to be more self-dependent, and to rely to themselves in a more specific way. So the perception knob, as I showed, is a very important knob. At least you should be aware of the perception of people you are at hand. And likely you have to turn that knob in the good direction in order to get the other processes running in the right smooth direction. So you cannot ignore that.
I was going to jump in really quickly, if you don't mind, with one question, because we didn't spend much time on sarcopenia. And I was wondering if you could what is the state of the art in terms of rehabilitation and physical therapy in the context of sarcopenia these days?
There's evidence of resistance exercise training combined with protein supplementation for sarcopenia. That works in even older patients with a large with the high grades of sarcopenia. So the current evidence is that it's all about those exercise training and protein supplementation. The point is that again, if you want to improve muscle quality, that kind of therapy may work quite well. So if you want to increase muscle mass or you want to increase muscle strength, you may do those exercises. But if your outcome is to on the performance level, we should do something more, I would say. Yeah.
Maybe just one more question, Jimmy.
Okay, I'll go for the last question. So, what role do you see for regenerative medicines in the future for rehabilitations? I think the regenerative medicine here means maybe like stem cell therapy, tissue engineering, or gene therapy, and so on.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, that's some of the holy grails, So that's something. If you have your regeneration in line, you can restore a pre-lesional body state. That's all. That's something we all want. So if you get a person in a better state instead of only looking at compensational strategies, that would be the preferred strategy, of course. So meanwhile, we have to do with these kinds of schemes. So restoration of pre-body state, not only by regenerative medicine, but also by prevention, is something we should all aim at. And at least we should do something about secondary and tertiary prevention to get people after something has happened again right on track. So attention for that by lifestyle interventions, lifestyle advices, in the preventive, but also in the secondary and tertiary preventive states are becoming more and more important.
Carol, it's really great that you could come on the show. Thanks a lot for an interesting presentation. I want to remind everyone to use the chat function and panelists and all attendees option to leave comments and feedback so everyone can view it. We will be back next week when our speaker will be Gunther Lepperdinger from University of Salzburg talking about deconstructing and reconstructing bone. And tonight we'll leave you with a video of a 78-year-old who can squat more than you, probably.
I'd never done any sports. I didn't know anything about powerlifting. I never even heard about powerlifting. I feel strength when I powerlift. It tells me I can beat the world. I just want to inspire other women to take care of themselves. My name is Nora Langdon. I'm 78 years young, and I'm a professional powerlifter.
I remember we first came here, they weren't familiar with us, and we were getting ready for a meet, and I had 350 on the squat bar, and the guys were like, "Is that for you?" I said, "No, it's for her." And they were, "Oh my God. You get a 78-year-old lady squatting 300 pounds, they squat, doing any kind of squatting, it's just amazing. But to do that type of weight, half the guys in the gym can't do that."
Goal is to do 500. And if I can do that by the time I'm 80, that would be wonderful. Because that'd be a real world record for an 80-year-old woman to do 500 pounds. That I hope the world recognizes me at that point.
The champ is here!
I'm excited. I'm not ready to quit. I'm gonna keep going until the good Lord take me home.
Like sunshine, like springtime, like something's in the water and I'm taking a deep dive. I'm feeling so weightless, like I'm gonna make it, and nothing in the universe can take this. I can see it clearly now, nothing gonna bring me down.